morning to the Honorable Prime Minister, member of the media, radio listeners via St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM, Tell TV Plus, respective radio stations island-wide, and online viewers. I'm Rolika Roach, and welcome to the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, February 14th, 2024. At this time, I would like to invite the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs, Sir Vera Jacobs, to address you. Prime Minister Jacobs, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ms. Roach. Good morning to you. Good morning to the member of the press here present. Good morning to all the people of St. Martin joining via whichever medium. Today is Valentine's Day, so let me start with that. Happy Valentine's Day to each and every one celebrating. Love is at the center of everything for me, and we don't need to wait on a special day to do so. But of course, special days are there to just do it extra. So continue to show love, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings in need of love. Show love, and I know many people even use this time to show love to their pets. So humankind, animal kind, just being kind to others, I think, is a sign of love. So wishing everyone a blessed and happy day. I must say congratulations also to St. Martin, having increased the port of call with the largest ship yesterday. Being on the Icon of the Seas was indeed an iconic moment for us, seeing what all the amenities are on board, and still having over 4,000 passengers leave the ship to come on the island, as well as having two other large ships in port. Hopefully, it also translates into economic development for St. Martin at all levels, and that the vendors are able to make use of the opportunity to turn their hand, as we say here in St. Martin. It's always an opportunity for me, a good opportunity to be here with you. I apologize for my lateness. As you know, I do have two functions now, and I had already made another commitment as well, which made me a bit late, but I always seek to be here in case there are questions. I don't have a whole lot of presentation today. In fact, I don't have a presentation today. I mainly came for the main reason if there are questions from the community. What I wanted to say, though, is that there seems to be a bit of a misunderstanding as to what a transition government is, and especially after the swearing in of members of parliament, which four council members within the Council of Ministers also were re-elected to parliament, that it ended up seeming to people like that was the end of our governing period. So I just wanted to ensure that I was here today to enlighten the general public that governance continues, that the executive branch continues to work, all seven ministers, as well as the minister plenipotentiary, in representing the people of St. Martin in carrying out the ongoing works. We are restricted in not going into new policies or new legislations, as I mentioned last week. But however, anything that was already in the pipeline will be able to be finalized and is being finalized as we speak. So I want to thank the people of St. Martin for their congratulatory remarks, as I was also one of those members of parliament re-elected, as I was in 2020, and I am now serving in two capacities. I am here as the Prime Minister, but as needed, I am also serving within the halls of Parliament as a member of Parliament. And this week, we're going through an orientation process, so especially the new, but also we as experienced members of Parliament can be updated as to the roles, responsibilities, and the way Parliament actually works. So I do look forward to those sessions, as I haven't been in Parliament in quite a while. So it's a juggling process, and we will continue to do our best to ensure the continuity of government, especially as it pertains to preparing the transition document, which I promised and discussed a bit last week. So with that being said, Rolika, I yield the floor to you for any questions.
Thank you, Prime Minister Jacobs. If you've just joined us, you are watching the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, February 14th, 2024. We now move on to the question and answer session, and I would like to invite Mr. Emily of Island 92 Radio. You have the floor.
Good morning. I know, Prime Minister, again, thank you for making the time to be here. I know you were all the way on the French side, and I'm sure with Carnival and everything, I'm sure it was quite an ordeal to get here. I appreciate you making the effort. There was a statement made by the outgoing Member of Parliament, William Marlin, which refers to a robust treasury with almost 90 million guilders in it. So there's first of all, there's obviously a difference between cash flow and budgets, but perhaps you could clarify government's current financial situation in terms of its cash flow, and if there's 90 million guilders in the Treasury, I know there's still quite a lot of vendors out there that haven't been paid. So I think it creates a bit of confusion of, if there's that much money there, why haven't we been paid?
Yes, so definitely I think that 90 million would, create some discussions. As you know, having sat at this on this side as well, there are the ongoing costs. Not all the bills, of course, of 2023 have been paid, and still there are expenditures to be made, to be carried out. It's an advisory process. Some things go back for further elucidation, especially if a tender hasn't been done or if it is not clear what the process that was followed was. We want to ensure that we are doing our due diligence within the process, and so certain things still have to be finalized. Also, I think I mentioned before that there were several vendors who did not have contracts. So the Ministry of General Affairs is busy finalizing a process by which these persons can be paid, because you would have needed a contract. But some of them have already executed the service. And as well, other ongoing things like the OZR costs and other things, we have made payments to SZV in December, I believe. We made another payment. But if there's a possibility that all of the liquidity that is there outside of CapEx, because that 90 million also includes the capital expenditures that are there for investment projects that will then impact on a different level, not for operations day to day. So those CapEx cannot be used for operational matters, such as ongoing services and paying other invoices and bills. So most of those that I know about are in process at some stage or the other, which requires, of course, the cooperation of the Ministry of Finance and sometimes the governor, depending on the cost.
So just to drill down into it a little bit. So there is 90 million guilders in terms of liquidity in the accounts for St. Martin government. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And then you mentioned CapEx forms part of that. So that's the money that you have approved for investments in infrastructure type projects. Do you know roughly how much of the 90 million is CapEx?
I think it's around 70.
70.
Yes, 60
okay,
to 70
so
million.
The bulk of the funds.
The bulk of the funds are for capital expenditures.
Okay.
Expenditures. But we were able to book more revenue. I think we've said that before. More revenue than projected on the budget. So actually more liquidity came in than what we had expected to come in 2023.
So recently at...
I don't have the exact figures.
Sure. Recently at the Simpson Bay Resort, there was a tourism symposium, and a number, actually, I think all of the marketing reps for the island were there. And many of them had reported that they're behind in payments. So those contracts, I assume, are contracts that are in place and that, given government's liquidity, should be settled soon. Is that what you would then expect?
I believe any market reps, the process, if it requires a Council of Ministers decision or a national decree, then it would have to go through that process. And I believe each advice would then have its own reason why it didn't get finalized as yet. But I trust that the Tourist Bureau and the Ministry of TEAT is working diligently on that. I knew one of them, we did have some questions, so it went back to get some elucidation also from the Ministry of Finance.
Okay.
Mr. Lee, off to your second question now?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, we move on to the second round.
I received two press releases from the Department of Statistics. One of them, the most recent one, is about the Consumer Price Index. And what's helpful is it's footnoted. And then there's also a contact person in terms of if you require more information, right? In contrast, there was another press release. This is dated January 29th. I understand that you're not the Minister of TEAT and therefore not over stats. However, the Department of Communications does fall under the Ministry under the Prime Minister. And in here it talks about arrival figures, and there's a lot of questions that we have about the figures, and it doesn't specify what the source of the information is, and it also doesn't provide any contact information for follow-up questions. So I reached out to the Department of Statistics to ask if they could provide more insight into their information. I haven't received a response as yet. So my question to you is, what is government's policy in terms of department heads or specific departments being able to respond to media about these types of questions? Is it something that has to come through the minister, or can we go directly? Are the department heads authorized to speak to the media in terms of clarifying these kinds of statements?
I don't think there's a straight policy across the board. I think it would depend on the type of department within the ministry. Some departments do have a level of independence, inspectorates, etc. They can, I believe, respond because they function outside of the mandate of the minister because they hold accountable inspectors. And I know within ministries where I've worked, we would at least as ministers like to be abreast of whatever queries are going out, that there's an approval process. So it could be that an approval process is required to be able to share certain information that is not public.
So, but perhaps a request to Department of Communications as they're sending out press releases, contact information for if there's follow-up questions, and certainly citing the references or the sources of the information, such as the arrival figures. I assume these are from the airport, but I don't know if it's from immigration. I don't know, for example, the arrival figures for air. Does that include arrivals to the French side, or is the Dutch side pulled out?
All arrival figures are received via the airport, via customs, so they're corroborated that way before they're disseminated, and it would be arrivals, period, not where their final destination was. I think they would have it broken down in further details, but the initial arrival figures would be denoted for persons arriving via our ports of entry.
Right.
And via the airport and the customs department.
So, for example, that would mean that
Immigration
the
and customs.
Arrival numbers are the arrivals of persons to either the French side or Dutch side via the airport. So,
our arrivals would be at PGIE.
Yeah, correct.
At the ports, the ports, whether they are in Great Bay or in Simpson Bay on the lagoon, whether they come by boat or by plane. There's always immigration that does their check and the airport, and then that information is sent on.
Okay.
But I do agree that as Department of Communications, we can confirm with those who send us press releases that they always include contact, how to get back in contact with the senders and or citing the sources. That's also a very good tip, I believe, that we can oversee as communications.
Thank you very much. Last week, I'm sorry.
We now move on to the final question. Emily, you have the floor.
Final question. Okay.
If you have two, I think we can squeeze in two.
Okay. So last week we had touched briefly on, I'd seen several photos of accidents on the road where the accidents involved infrastructure of the island. So the Prince Bernard Bridge, for example, which was just recently tendered and repaired, and then there was an accident. And I know from previous discussions that government has not gone after the insurance money that actually should be available. In other words, if that vehicle hit a private wall, a house with a wall of a private individual, that private individual normally would claim from the insurance company of the vehicle to repair the wall. Is that something that government is looking into implementing, or have they been collecting that money now for incidents that involve government infrastructure?
Well, unfortunately, I wasn't able to touch base with the Ministry of Rami to get a definite on it, but I'm sure because of who my finance minister is, any opportunity to collect, to defray the costs that are legally permissible is something that we would definitely follow up with. So I'm not sure. We have had that discussion within the Council of Ministers prior, so I would want to hope that we are following up on it in the execution part of it. And if I may, I'm looking at the time, just add one more announcement. I think it's important for the general public to know that Budget 2024 was finalized by the organization, had received its advice from the Council of Advice, and the further report had been prepared by the Ministry of Finance, and therefore we felt it important to have the new Parliament review this budget so that the new Parliament would be able to have their say. But it is important for us as a country to ensure that our budget is handled. That is a legal requirement. We are late with it because the 2023 one was amended late in December. And so based on that, the entire trajectory was pushed down. So this has been approved and has been forwarded on via the governor to the Parliament of St. Martin. So after all these trainings and orientation meetings, I am expecting that within short, the Chair of Parliament would make it possible for us to have the budget debate. So that would then be giving us a perspective of what is possible for 2024, as well as give the new members of Parliament the opportunity to have, their say as legislators in amending and approving the budget. So I just felt that that was important information to share to the general public, as it is part of the ongoing concerns and actually a legal requirement.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Mr. Lee, you have one more question.
So as a follow-up, actually, to your statement, how complicated do you expect this discussion about the 2024 budget to be? Because the outgoing government has a governing program, and the budget should be a reflection of the execution of that governing program. And now you have a new government that's going to come in that hasn't laid out its governing program yet, but yet they need a budget that's going to reflect the execution of that. So while it's important to have the budget approved, I can imagine that this parliamentary discussion is going to be a very interesting and very political discussion, because it really, the budget reflects what the plans in terms of execution are for the government. Given the fact that there isn't a new governing program yet, how do you expect this discussion to go forward in Parliament? I
think on a policy and legislative perspective, I don't expect a lot of challenges, because if we looked at the informators report, there were not vast differences in policy and direction within any of the parties of St. Martin. So it basically said we should be on paper able to align in terms of what we want to see. And I did mention several times that we have a national vision for St. Martin, which is the overarching goal and vision of the country. So all of the objectives within this budget and the last few budgets, as well as I hope budgets to come, should reflect that 2030 vision and beyond. And I did not see anything within any of the governing programs of the various parties that would sway me in that regard. The ongoing projects, it's to ensure the continuity of, as you know, subsidies, the ongoing concerns, the increase in the salaries of our civil servants, as well as their vacation pay. It includes the increase for the police and the rest of the justice chain that had been budgeted for, as well as many other ongoing concerns. What I think the bigger challenge would be is in the policies or legislation to generate revenue. There you might decide you don't follow the vision of the Minister of Finance, this current Minister of Finance, to be able to use the methods he was seeking with the organization to generate funds. So that would be then, for me, the biggest part of the debate. There might be a wish to shift funds here or there. There is a right of amendment, and the members of Parliament are currently being enlightened as to what that entails. And yes, politicking got us to this point in a sense of you're now members of Parliament, but now you are governing and you are legislating. And there are no vast differences within the parties, to be honest. There needs to be accountability. There needs to be the belief that it can be executed, and it will be up to us as a sitting government to elucidate the budget as we presented it. And if we can convince them that this is something for the greater good, I would really want to hope that no politics will be played with the future development of this country, and not because it's presented by the outgoing government that you don't approve it, as I feel that most of it, for 90% at least, should not be a problem to be approved. And don't ask me what the 10% is.
So just a practical question. Because you're both member of government and a sitting member of Parliament, so will you sit on the side presenting the budget for the presentations through Parliament, and then I guess when it comes time to vote, then you will take your seat in Parliament. Is that
Yes,
how it
so
will
I
work?
have done this part once before, so I can speak with some experience on it. As usual, the budget has to be presented by the government. The finance minister will start off. We will decide on, as Parliament, will decide on how they would like the presentations to be done. Individual ministers will present their portion. I will, of course, then have to present the Ministry of General Affairs, and afterwards answer questions that are asked by the members of Parliament. Of course, when I am not required to answer questions, I can sit on the other side. But at this point, I really don't see a need to maybe be actively asking questions because it is what it is. We can also, as sitting members of Parliament, especially if we see changes being made, also weigh in as a National Alliance faction, which is, 3 of the 7 ministers in Parliament. And you also have the Minister Otley, who is a Minister of VSA, who's also an elected member. So it will be a juggling act in terms of where you're sitting, but regardless to which position I am sitting in the House of Parliament, it will be in representation of the people to the best of my ability. So I look forward to it because it is so necessary. Civil servants are already asking, why don't I see the 2% on my salary for January? Once the legislation is approved, it will be enacted retroactively to January 2024. So I would really like for the civil servants to be able to enjoy the 2% increase structurally on their salaries moving forward, as well as all the other good benefits that will come out of the budget 2024. Whatever needs to be debated, I would just want to trust that the people are watching, the same people who elected us, and will hold the members that they have elected accountable, because this is definitely, if changes happen, the elected officials, some of them may choose to become ministers as well. So this is an opportunity where you actually get to hold the people you voted for accountable, and I think that people should do their utmost to do that in a very transparent manner, ask the questions, send them in online, whatever the case may be, so that their voices are heard.
Thank you, Prime Minister Jacobs, and thank you, Mr. Ermeli. That does bring us to the end of the question and answer session. Any further questions can be sent to the Prime Minister's Cabinet in writing. Honorable Prime Minister, member of the media, radio listeners, and online viewers, this brings us to the end of the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, February 14th, 2024. For rebroadcast, tune into stmartingov.org, St. Martin Gov Radio via 107.9 FM, Telems Tel TV Plus, Channel 15, the official Facebook page of the Government of St. Martin, and YouTube channel Government of St. Martin. For video on demand, log on to the Government of St. Martin's YouTube channel. On behalf of the Government of St. Martin and the Department of Communication, I'm Rolika Roach and wishing you a happy Valentine and a pleasant day further.